underscore draft. Ian, good to see you, my friend. Happy 2026. Welcome back to Birds 365. How you doing today, my man?
Doing good. It's good to talk with you guys again. Anytime I'm talking with you, I know that we're on the ramp up to the NFL draft. Still free agency to go, but the combine just passed and a lot of new information there. So always fun to chop it up and ready to get going.
Yeah, happy draft season. Good to see you, Ian. I guess we'll start with the combine. I mean, I going into the combine, I get the feel talking, texting to people around the league. This draft isn't that great at the top, and all of a sudden you get to Indy, and I think this happens every year.
Yeah.
This might be the most athletic class of all time. I mean, it's just athletes off the board everywhere. And now you come out of Indy and there's like 50 first-round picks. This guy's a first-round pick. This guy's a first-round pick. So we'll start there. Where's your feel about this draft as a whole? How good it is, how deep it is, the positions that are deep, things like that.
Yeah, for sure. I think my outlook for the class didn't change too much at the NFL Combine. I think one thing that people have been making note of, and I think it's an important observation and delineation to make, is that less of the players who aren't expected to test well are testing, right? You're seeing more of the players who are expected to run a 4.40, right? Or expected to jump at least 35 inches in the vertical, right? Like there's a little bit of selection bias going on where we aren't seeing as many players test at the NFL Combine if they don't have as much to gain as they have to lose, and they can just log a better time at their pro day too. So there's a little bit of selection bias, fewer volume, but the guys that we did see this year, right, the times were off the hook, especially for some positions like corner and safety and wide receiver. Linebacker was incredibly fast too. But I think what that is more representative of is the fact that because a lot of the top players didn't test either, right? Guys who, again, didn't have as much to gain if you're near the top of the board and you can run a faster time at your pro day. What I think the combine best exemplifies this year is that, and it's kind of what the conclusion that I came to before in the all-star cycle around then, this class is kind of shaped like a bell curve, right? You don't have a ton of bona fide blue chip talent at the top of the board, and you don't have a ton of bona fide first round talent either. Every time I do a mock draft, I get to around 24, 25, and you're having to reach into that slightly, round two graded pool a little bit to get some guys to fill that out. That said, I think this class is really, really deep in the middle round range. I think from round 2 even to middle round 4 and maybe even early round 5, I do think you can find starting talent in this class. It's a really, really, kind of thick class in the middle as far as that's concerned. And I think for a lot of NFL teams, that's going to be a good thing because I think you can find genuine starting talent in that range. But as far as guaranteed impact players early on in their careers, not quite as many of those. Or if there are they have questions. Like with Arvell Reese, it's the positional designation. It's going to be an off-ball or edge. With Ruben Bain, it's the arm length, right? With David Bailey, it's the run defense and a little bit of stiffness in his hips, right? So you have question marks with all these guys that are, traditionally billed as these top flight, top 10 picks. But I also think this class compensates with just the sheer volume of middle round talent. I think there's going to be plenty of gems to take advantage of.
Ian, we're going to get into some individual players, obviously, but how do you think that bodes for, trading in within the draft? Howie Roseman's traded in the first round 4 of the last 5 drafts, either gone up or down. Seems to me, based on what you just said, that people might be trying to move down. I mean, especially where the Eagles are at that 23 spot. How do you see their value there at 23 and maybe what the Eagles could try and do at that spot?
Yeah, for sure. I definitely leaned more toward trading down. I think a lot of the pipe dreams that you'd have the Eagles potentially taking in the NFL draft, like some of these higher end corners, or maybe Kenyon Sadiq was mocked there sometimes. We know the long-term outlook with Dallas Goedert. He might come back for 2026, but not sure beyond that. But now you have Sadiq running a 4.39 and jumping what he did in the vertical, right? And showing off that speed and that athleticism, like probably not making it there, right? So yeah. I'd be willing to wager a lot of these guys, these blue chip or near blue chip talents are getting pushed up the board. Maybe for the Eagles, you do have a player who fits your value proposition, right? I know offensive line could be an area for them to target too, but guys like Monroe Friedling probably moving up the board, right? You could get Caden Proctor, Blake Miller, but again, it depends on the valuation. So I would definitely lean toward the Eagles trading a little bit down, right? I think they're well outside the blue chip threshold. That said, if a first round talent does fall to them, I can see them taking it. Or if a player is falling into the mid-teens, maybe make an aggressive move up. But I think the Eagles have enough needs where you want to play the value of the board. We know Howie Roseman has always been good at that. I think this class in particular, if you aren't sold on a guy in round 1 range, again, there are going to be a lot of opportunities to get potential role players or really quality gems in the middle rounds. So if you can get more dart throws in that range, I think that will behoove you more. So I would lean trading down. I think opportunity might be there to trade up, but there's less volume to trade up for, and there will be teams who will be aggressive if certain prospects fall.
All right, I'm going to be a tough grader here, and I want Ian Cummings' thought. I got 2 blue chip players, and one of them's a running back. Which I don't like to do, but I am in love with Jeremiah Love as a prospect. I think he's just phenomenal. And then the other one I have, and now I hear there's some medical concerns, and that's Caleb Downs, the safety from Ohio State. So that's it for me. Those are the 2 best players in the draft. Who are the best players in the draft according to Ian Cummings?
Caleb Downs is definitely up there. And I think as far as the medicals are concerned, it's different for every team. Corey Kinnan had a great report come from the combine citing that, he was flagged with a partially torn meniscus and a potentially degenerative ACL, right? Now there's a clarification that needs to be made with any medical check. It doesn't proliferate what happens in the pros, right? Like you can have a flagged medical evaluation, but then go on to have a healthy career. You can have a spotless medical check and go on to get really bad injury luck in the pros. So, there is a level of entropy that comes with it. I do think though with Caleb Downs, it's worth noting for a few separate factors, right? One, the positional value of the safety position, right? Time and time again, we see these safeties who are billed as can't miss prospects and they fall down the board because teams just don't value that position quite as much. Do I agree with that assessment? Not particularly. I think having a safety blanket on the back end like Caleb Downs, who can play split field to single high in the box as a rover, even some big nickel reps against tight ends, I think having that kind of chess piece can be extremely valuable, right? But teams just don't share that sentiment, it seems, with their actions, right? Kyle Hamilton obviously fell to the teens when he was viewed as a blue chip prospect. So, and then you throw in the fact that Caleb Downs is around average size. He's probably not going to test as an elite athlete at the pro day. I think he's got very good with coverage mobility, but not quite the size speed freak that we've seen elevated when it is the safety going pretty early. And then on top of that, the medical red flags, or not red flags, but the medical question mark, I'll say, into that factor too. You could see him potentially, and then also another one, Dylan Thieneman from Oregon, testing the way that he did at the NFL Combine. That's safety too. That's another first-round prospect. There's an outcome where Thieneman goes above Downs if teams are scared enough of the medical issue. Film-wise, I agree with you. He's a top 2 prospect in the class. His football IQ is through the roof. I think he has the functional coverage mobility. He's got the targeted physicality and run defense. And when opportunities come his way, he can make plays at the catch point. But there are a lot of elements of uncertainty clouding over his profile. Jeremiah Love is up there for me. He's a top 10 prospect on my board, 6 foot, over 210, running the way that he did. It was just a verification of what we've seen on the film, right? Elite explosion, elite long speed, but also he sizes up really well with physicality. I think he's very good at playing with tenacity in contact situations, driving forward through defenders. And then at the end of the day too, he's very proficient at creating space and capitalizing behind the line of scrimmage, right? My favorite, the way that I word it, he's a really proficient toggle and throttle runner, right? Where he can toggle a little bit behind the line of scrimmage to press linebackers outside of gaps and then just divert upfield and capitalize. And he's got that game-breaking speed where if you give him an angle, he's going to just obliterate your tackling angle, your pursuit angle, and he's going to get upfield. And then he's got the agility, the creative ability too. So he actually has a higher grade on my board than Ashton Jeanty did have last cycle. So it's a representation of how good he is. That said, there is one more prospect in the top 3 blue chip range for me, and that's Sonny Styles, linebacker out of Ohio State. And the way that he tested is, again, verification of he's the real deal physically and mentally. 6'5", 244, near 33-inch arms, ran a 4.46, 43.5-inch vertical, which is certifiably insane. And it's unbelievable, man. And the worst metric was like an over 7.3 cone, which was still in the 70th percentile, right? So he's a freakish athlete, a former safety, and it shows on the film. But also I think his mental game is just as strong as his physical game, which is scary. I mean, he's an elite processor. He's so good at reading gaps and, staying square to his assignments. And then he's got the size and the strength and the power and the explosion to really just, launch into contact, fully stack and shed, make tackles behind the line of scrimmage. He's got depth discipline, as you would expect from a former safety, in coverage. And then he had 6 sacks in 2024, rushing the passer as a blitzer. He's got really good efficiency in that phase too. So I know off-ball linebacker, like safety, is another position that gets hit with the, positional value designation. What do we do with this? But when a player is as dynamic, as versatile, and just as good straight up as Sonny Styles, it's really difficult to pass on them in that range. So, looking at how well he checks the boxes, he's another one right up there.
Yeah. Well, all three guys are at positions: running back, safety, weak side linebacker, where generally, they're not going to take you at the top of the draft. So we'll see how that affects the top. Obviously, we know Fernando Mendoza is going to go number 1 overall. After that, are there any quarterbacks worthy in your mind of going in the first round?
Right now, I would say no. But I think Ty Simpson has scarcity on his side. We see scarcity elevate QB prospects every single year, right? Jackson Dart, you can look at
JJ McCarthy, man.
JJ McCarthy, exactly, right? It's like, and Kenny Pickett going back a few years, going for round 1 when a lot of people had day 2 grades at most. I had a day 2 grade on Dart. He's been really good early in his career, but again, there was a little bit of elevation factor there too. But yeah, scarcity is really powerful when it comes to QBs, because QBs, by and large, by far the most valuable position. I think there's a consensus agreement on that. If you don't have a QB, then you can't compete. Or, we know that there have been some flashes in the pans. The Eagles with Nick Foles winning the Super Bowl, prime example, right? But even then,
you're going to get in trouble, Ian. But you're 100% correct. But here you're going to get in trouble.
Here's the thing, though. It's
correct.
It's possible, right? But is it the most sustainable method of success? No. By and large, you need a QB, right, who can elevate your team, at the very least keep you competitive. And I think Fernando Mendoza is that caliber of QB. He's not quite at the level of Drake May or Caleb Williams for me, but he would grade around the range that Jaden Daniels graded for me. So still a very, very good QB prospect, worthy of that franchise label. Ty Simpson, on the other hand, though, the next guy up, and his best film from 2025 was really good. You're looking at that midseason stretch games like LSU, where he was really in rhythm. He was showing good processing ability, anticipation over the middle. And I love how easily he retorques his hips. He's very mechanically sound when he's in rhythm, right? He can get that hip torque, that full velocity generation, can keep his shoulders level and hit guys over the middle. But down the stretch, and there's been some speculation that he was dealing with injuries too. His play was not quite as consistent. The word that always comes to mind for me, and this is not a word that you want to hear with a QB, because in the NFL, you're facing pressure on every single down, both ambient pressure, right, with the situation, but also direct pressure, guys rushing the A gap, the B gap, the C gap. So you can't be frenetic as a QB. And that's the word that always comes to mind with Ty Simpson. There's a lot of freneticism to his game where he's just a little too jittery, a little too easily spooked off his spot, or out of sync, especially down the stretch this past year. Right at his best, you saw a little more composure, but for a guy who's frenetic he can be frenetic with his mechanics and his accuracy and situational precision, right? And even the processing, sometimes where he's spooked off his initial read, is a little late to recover as a result, missing progressions over the middle because of that. You can't be inconsistent on the operational side when you're not an elite physical talent, right? Ty Simpson, 6'1", 211 at the NFL Combine, not an elite athlete, a good creator, right? Has good arm talent, but is he elite in any of those categories? No, right? So I know people have been throwing around the top end comp of a Brock Purdy if he can get that operational consistency. My comp for him through the cycle has been Mark Bulger, going back to the Rams. I think Mark Bulger was a little bit bigger, but you're looking at a guy, again, who was more reliant on mechanical congruence and processing, right? And at his best, accuracy when he was in rhythm, but didn't quite have that level of physical talent to elevate the Rams and get them to Super Bowl contention consistently, right? So I still think Ty Simpson, top 50 player, but is he a first rounder for me? No, but I also understand scarcity is a really powerful elevating factor. And then
quick to your scarcity point, because I want to take it to the Eagles. And I want to bring it up to Garrett. I want to get your thoughts on Garrett Nussmeier, because we don't have scarcity. You got to see the warts. He played a lot at LSU. I know the Eagles have had interest in him for a long time. When Doug Nussmeier was here, they got to know him very well, sort of a friend of the program. Where are you after the poor season? And obviously we were talking about him as a potential top 15 pick at one point. Now he's kind of off the radar. What do you think him as a prospect? Because I think, the Eagles have a history of taking quarterbacks when you might not expect it, and he might be a day 2 guy for them.
For sure. And just like scarcity can elevate a day 2 guy into day 1, it can elevate a day 3 into day 2, right? So it kind of goes down the board. Garrett Nussmeier, and we're talking about scarcity a lot, so let me go all the way back to the summer of 2025, right? When we didn't know who was going to be the QB1 of the 2026 class, and you see everyone rolling out their way too early mock drafts, right? I do think scarcity may have played a hand in elevating his preseason profile a little bit. He had a day 2 grade for me, a mid to late day 2 at best coming into the cycle. So I never really saw him as that top 15 prospect bona fide. And a big reason for that, the talent profile, right? I just don't think he quite has the high, not a prototypical QB, right? And I do think the arm strength when he's healthy is above average. Is it elite? No. And then he's not really a high-end athlete either. There's kind of the craftiness of a Tony Romo or Andy Dalton at his peak, but again, not a guy who's going to consistently stress defenses with his physical tools. And then you look at the operational inconsistency that followed in 2025. There were times when, I think as a processor, he's elite. He's one of the best processors in the class. And you can really tell that he is an offensive coordinator's son with the way that he can operate and dictate the offense pre-snap, right? Undress defensive looks, get players in position, things like that, read coverages and spacing as well pre-snap to identify opportunities. But post-snap, there's just too many head-scratching decisions, right? Where sometimes he'll have good field vision, but he'll miss a linebacker undercutting a second-level window, right? And just throw an interception or he'll have lapses in situational precision, again, making receivers work harder than they should for balls. Now, there's a very important caveat. Garrett Nussmeier was dealing with an oblique injury through most of the 2025 season, and that severely affects your velocity, your throwing motion, and your comfort, right? So I understand why there was that downturn, right? And I'm definitely, and looking at the Senior Bowl, he played very well at the Senior Bowl. I think he progressed through the week, and on day 3 in particular, day 3 of practices through the 2-minute drill, you saw him again doing what he does best, commanding the offense, keeping them on schedule, making quick, decisive reads, and throwing with accuracy and velocity when he's healthy, right? So I think going back to the film is going to be really challenging, right? Because 2025, he was not at his best, clearly. I think at his best, you could rationalize him being a day 2 pick for sure. And I think in the right situation, he could be a really solid spot starter. Again, my high-end comp is Andy Dalton. I think at his best, he can be a solid year-over-year starter for you. But eventually, you're going to find that he's not going to elevate your team, and you're going to look elsewhere for that next level, right? So a really interesting evaluation. I think he wins in a lot of ways that are translatable when he's at his best with cerebral play style, processing, and accuracy when he's comfortable and not below 100%. But you also have that middling physical talent profile that's really tough to get away from, right? So you got to be tempered with your expectations and with your valuation, but especially like you said, in this class, scarcity, right? That's a really big factor. And he's got the pedigree coaching background with his father. He's got the experience. He's got the processing ability. And I think he has okay baseline talent. Again, far from elite, right? Closer to average than elite. But all it takes is one team to get won over by the mental makeup and kind of, believe that he's above average in that talent threshold, and that alone can get him in a day 2 range. So I'd say, still a mid to late day 2, early day 3 guy for me. But if there's anyone who can elevate into day 2, it's him because of those underlying factors.
Great breakdown there for me and Cummings.